Hey guys, I'm back. Thank you for coming to my channel. In this video, you'll be learning about prepositions of manner. So before I get started with the video, I just want to be vulnerable and apologize that I've been gone for almost 2 months. I know people like content creators that are reliable and that post consistently, so I'm sorry that I haven't been doing that for the past, almost 2 months. I'm going to be vulnerable again and say sometimes I have my moments where I feel like my videos are great and I explain things very well and the videos are providing value. And then sometimes I have my moments where I'm like, does this video make sense? Are people gonna understand what I'm trying to explain? Or I'll be like, this video is boring. I have to add something to make it different from everybody else's videos. Like, it has to be more interesting or creative. But I think sometimes I just be overthinking stuff. But let me not forget to acknowledge the positive things. I will say I really appreciate when you guys view my videos, of course, and when you guys like the videos. I would really appreciate if you guys gave me more feedback or feedback in general, because I think only one person has commented on any of my videos. And it would be nice if you guys gave me feedback. That could be positive feedback or not so positive feedback. As long as you're not being rude or anything like that, I appreciate all kinds of feedback, because how else am I going to improve? Okay, enough of my monologue. Thank you guys so much for the love and support, and let's get to the video. So what are prepositions of manner? Prepositions of manner tell us how something is done. So these are all prepositions of manner: by, on, in, with, like, without, and as. By being used in sentences. Our first example says, I'm traveling by plane. So how am I traveling? By plane. Notice how this sentence is telling us how something is being done. It's telling us how I'm traveling. Example 2 says, you need to abide by the rules. So notice how this sentence is telling us how something needs to be done. You need to abide by the rules. Also, this is like a more formal way of saying you need to follow the rules. Our last example says, she commutes to work by bike. How does she commute to work? She commutes to work by bike. So this sentence is telling us how she commutes to work. Next, we have on being used in sentences. So our first example says, she arrived at the event on foot. So how did she arrive at the event? She arrived at the event on foot. This sentence is telling us how she arrived at the event. Example 2 says, I filled out the application on my own. So how did I fill out the application? I filled out the application on my own. And our last example says, she is walking on her toes. How is she walking? She is walking on her toes. So notice how all of these examples tell us how something is being done. In being used in sentences. Our first example says, she is speaking in a rude tone. So how is she speaking? She is speaking in a rude tone. This sentence is telling us how something is being done. Well, how the speaking is being done. Our second example says, you should present yourself in a professional manner. So how should you present yourself? You should present yourself in a professional manner. So this sentence is telling us how you should present yourself. And our last example says, I will talk in a low voice. I will talk how? I will talk in a low voice. So notice how each of these examples is telling us how something is being done, or shall I say, how the action is being done. Next, we have with being used in sentences. So our first example says, she arrived with her friend. Our next example says, I am eating my soup with a spoon. So this example is telling us how I am eating my soup. I am eating my soup with a spoon. Our third example says, she brushed her hair with a pink brush. So how did she brush her hair? She brushed her hair with a pink brush. So notice how each of these examples is telling us how something is being done. Next, we have as being used in sentences, and this one is kind of tricky to me. But the first two examples just indicate the job or capacity in which someone is acting. I feel like this is one of those things in English that doesn't really make sense to me, but it's still a rule. Because my logic is, if prepositions of manner tell us how something is done, if I'm saying I am known as an English teacher, like how is that telling us how something is done? To me, it's more so telling us what you're known as, not how something is done. But I guess it makes sense because if it's indicating the job or capacity in which something is done, that is actually saying how something is done. It's just saying how something is done in a weird way. Our next example says, I'm quitting my job as a basketball coach. And our last example says, my name is Sarah and I'd like to be addressed as such. How would I like to be addressed? I would like to be addressed as such, which is Sarah. Next, we have like being used in sentences. Our first example says, you're behaving like a child. How are you behaving? You're behaving like a child. Our second example says, she is throwing a tantrum like a toddler. How is she throwing a tantrum? She's throwing a tantrum like a toddler. And our last example says, she wants to be a math teacher like her mom. So all of these examples are describing how an action is performed by comparing that action to something else. Like a child, like a toddler, and like her mom. Lastly, we have without being used in sentences. Our first example says she performed without her family's support. So how did she perform? She performed without her family's support. Our second example says he ate his dinner without a utensil. And our third example says I played basketball without wearing my glasses. So each example is telling us how something is being done. Without her family's support, without a utensil, and without wearing my glasses. So in each example, without is being used to tell us how the action is being done. So that's all for this video. Thank you guys so much for the love and support. And thanks again for being patient with me while I was in my content making slump. And if you learned something from this video, don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe, or all of the above. And I'll see you next time.